Hi, I'm Ed Werder here at the Star, co-hosting with Darren Woodson eventually this podcast series based on the 8-part Netflix documentary, which you're all in, America's Team, The Gambler and His Cowboys. And our guests today are Stephen Jones, 36 years of experience in the NFL, co-owner of the franchise, chief operating officer. Charlotte Jones is the chief brand officer and also co-owner of the Dallas Cowboys. And then Jerry Jr., co-owner, chief sales and marketing officer of the Dallas Cowboys. Thank all three of you for joining here and being a part of this podcast. I think it's going to be fascinating for Cowboy fans, all of whom have no doubt seen the entire series. My first question, Charlotte, is when you were made aware of Netflix's interest in doing a documentary primarily on Jerry and the Cowboys from 1-15 to 3 Super Bowl titles, what were your first thoughts about what that was going to entail for you?
You know, I think our first thought was, can they really capture what actually happened back then? And, you know, I think there's always history, there's always story, there's always headlines, things that you actually go back and reflect on to bring that story back to life. But what really happened in the middle of all of that, I was truly hopeful that they would dig in and really get the story behind the story. And I think that was really what our journey was focused on. And not just from our end, from as a family, and each one of us, and Dad and my mom, who's also in it, but all of the players that were around at that time. So, you know, you wanted them to really do their homework, because the directors, as you may know, they weren't born then. So they're learning this story from the archives. So pulling out all the history and all the past, and you just really hope that they would really dig and find the true story. And
Jerry, how well do you think they did that?
Well, I think they did, like anything that when you don't have editing rights, but they get in there, but I think you want to make it interesting, and so they have their job to do. But as far as the things that were portrayed and for those great years during the 90s, early 90s that we had with the Cowboys, I think they did a great job with that. But I think they did a really great job of really showing kind of what Jerry was going through, what Dad was going through as those years were happening. And I think that was really what we hoped as a family was being shown, is some things that really were not just what you read in the paper or what you just saw on the sports channel, but it really was what he was about, what his DNA is, and what his character was as far as how he was going about making those decisions.
Stephen, did you think they captured all of those long ago moments well and accurately told the story?
Yeah, I would give them. I'd give them a lot of credit of getting the job done. I think, one thing you have to realize when you're a part of something that is as big as that was, in terms of all the people involved, the team, the players on the team, the coaches, management, ownership, the people covering the team. You're in it, Ed, of course, and did a great job, by the way. But everybody has a different view and is looking at what's going on and what went on through a different lens. And I think by, interviewing the Michael Irvins, the Troy Aikmans, the Deion Sanders, the Emmitt Smiths, Jimmy Johnson, Barry Switzer, certainly our family, I think it certainly gives everybody different perspectives on how the thing was looked at. And of course, a big part of it was, certainly the success we had with Jimmy, and then Barry, and then certainly looked at what happened after that. And everybody had their own thoughts on what exactly happened, and I thought they did an outstanding job of really getting a lot of different perspectives on what actually happened.
I thought one of the things they did well early on was, show your dad in sort of private family type situations, like at the family, the place where you go duck hunting, the lodge, and at his father's, your grandfather's gravesite. I mean, what was that experience like for you guys watching it on TV, Stephen?
Well, I think you see the part of Jerry a lot of people don't see, and probably don't understand that that's really what he's all about at the end of the day. He certainly, has this larger-than-life persona as a marketeer and, somebody who has a passion for the Cowboys. But at the end of the day, Jerry is all about family. Certainly he loves Charlotte, he loves Jerry, he loves myself, and it was shown through his actions. I mean, he coached my teams, he never missed Charlotte's event, went to college with her, coached Jerry's teams, went to college with him. That's what he's all about at the end of the day, and you wouldn't believe what he's been as a grandfather and even a great grandfather, how much he embraces. You would find it hard to believe there he is, 82 years old and holding these little babies and just, in love with them. And, that's what a lot of people don't see about him. And I think a little bit came out too, how much he actually cares for his players. He's there for them. He's there for Michael. He's there for Dion. He was there for Emmett. I think Emmett said, I could truly tell that was hard for him to move on from Emmett and let Emmett go to the Cardinals. He could tell, he said he had a tear in his eye. And I think that's one of the things, with players that play here, as Jerry has a great love and passion for the people who go out on the field and lay it on the line. He feels the same way for his coaches. And I think they did a good job of pulling some of that out. I think they could have done even more because I think that's the way he is. But I was very pleased with that part of it.
Charlotte, what was it like to see photographs and pictures of your mom when they were in college and she was a homecoming queen and they were dating and them telling that story? What was that like?
I loved all of the history, all of how they were in the beginning and the journey until now. And I think that the discovery for us as we saw each episode was we were surprised at how many things, and I think Dad would tell you the same thing of like, oh my gosh, I never saw that story. Oh my gosh, I never heard that. Because you forget today that back then, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have Google, we didn't have any of this. So if you didn't see it when it ran on the news or in that paper that day, you missed it. So a lot of the things that they pulled out of the archives, and I think this was the probably their hardest part of the journey, is that there was so much information there. I think the beauty of the Cowboys is everyone is interested, whether you love or you hate, you're interested. So the volume of material that they had to sort through and headlines and commentary from all across the country for years, and at that time was so concentrated that some of the things that made it to the documentary, Dad's like, wow, I never knew that. We're learning something every day about that. And I think the other thing that was really special about it is that every player that was involved, every person that was involved in the documentary just chose to be truly authentic about what happened and what it was like. So everyone brought their authentic self to the camera and told their story, told their feelings, told their perspective, all of the things that happened, which you don't get like in real life because you can't. Like you can't afford to show your hand when it's actually happening, but to go back and reflect on that, I thought that was one of the most brilliant parts of the whole thing.
So I came here to Dallas in 1989. So did you guys. And I've always said that never would have had the career I've had if it hadn't been for the Cowboys. And I think the same applies to all three of you. When you became aware that your dad was buying the Dallas Cowboys and was going to own an NFL team, Jerry, I'll start with you. What were your thoughts about what that meant for you?
Well, I don't think any of us will ever forget where the conversation was happening, but we were up in Washington, D.C., and we were sitting there, the three of us. We were actually up there for the presidential inauguration for President George Bush, 61, not 63. But he was really going over his financial commitment with the team and was talking to us as if, I'm really about to take everything that I'm about and really push the chips all in, if you will. And he was telling us if this doesn't work, we might have to start over, but we're not going to lose our house. And I remember leaving that. I was a freshman in college, and I'm thinking, well, at least when I leave, go back home my first semester of college, I can still sleep in the bed I grew up in, but there might not be a car outside. But it was that kind of financial commitment, and he was really just emphasizing, going over that, but it was also a good example of how much he wanted us involved in the future of his financial life and the way he was going to go about his life with business. And Stephen had already been doing that for a few years. Charlotte was just getting started, and of course I was just starting college. But it was really important to him that this was a family decision, and we all supported what he wanted to do, just like we do often today. But it was really eye-opening about the commitment, and I think the show, I think it really showed the risk that he did take in buying the Dallas Cowboys. And I think that our fans and for that fact our organization, but our players and our coaches that Stephen talked on a little bit earlier, but if there is any doubt that there is no man who wants to win a Super Bowl more than him, that I think it did a good job of showing that that's what he's doing this for, and he wanted Charlotte, Stephen, myself, our whole family involved in this, and we had no idea what we were about to jump into. But here we are 35 years later, and has it changed our lives? For sure it's changed our lives, but it's gave us a great opportunity to be involved with something so exciting as the Dallas Cowboys, but also work together, but also commit our lives to it.
It's kind of amazing because people forget, all they hear now is Cowboys franchise valuation, $13 billion, by far the most in professional sports. And yet, were you aware at all, Stephen and Charlotte, about the risks that your father was taking financially?
Oh my gosh, yes, because I felt like he was telling us about it because he needed somebody to support his decision, because the smart business people in his life and his attorneys and everyone were saying, this is a dumb deal, don't do it. You shouldn't do it. It's losing money. It's why it was for sale in the first place. And I remember sitting there with Jerry, and the only time Dad's ever underestimated anything he's ever told us was, if we do this, this just might change our life a little. And it was like, oh my gosh. And, we never looked back. I mean, boy did it beyond that. And you the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Charlotte and Jerry summarized it real well. I had a little different perspective in that I was actually working at the time, but I was an engineer in the oil and gas business and had played football at Arkansas, but we were on a trip. We had been to a natural gas conference, and we were in Cabo, and he knew I loved to deep sea fish. He hated it, by the way, because he got seasick. So he sent me out, and that's when he learned through reading in the paper the Cowboys were for sale. So when I got back to shore, he said, we're going to go look at the Cowboys. This will be a good learning experience. I'm having George Mitchell and Jack Dixon fly in to look at the team. He goes, I probably shouldn't be there, so you can go sit in and, you'll learn something. And boy, I kept hearing that you said, some of his trusted lieutenants in the accounting area, which I by no means was an accountant, but I was listening to him, and we all know the old saying that it was losing $1 million a month, and it was, according to the way our accounting staff looked at it. And, I was thinking, there's no way he's going to do this. This doesn't sound too good. I said, we've done really well, or he's done really well, because we're in the process of selling our oil business. And I go, but no one wants to sign up for that. And sure enough, everybody got their calls, and he said, what do you think about it? I said, Dad, I love football. I played in college. I go, are you kidding me? I'm packing my bag and headed that way. And Jerry was finishing up school, and Charlotte, I think you were working in Washington. Mm-hmm. And it was great perspective, but he had a vision. I think he really had a vision. He really did diligence in terms of going to visit with what is still today the most important part of the NFL, which is our media partners and our media rights. That really is the engine that's always, whether it's money for the players or whether it's making our business good, our media partners have been our heart and soul. And he went and visited with those people and really gave him a great feeling that this thing was going to continue to move in a positive direction. But he certainly had a vision for it. He outbid some interesting people. As he said, he probably never would have gotten his hands on it had Dallas not been in very difficult economic times. It was in the late 80s when a lot of people were struggling. And we know those people today. We run in those circles with people who you would have thought would have bought the Dallas Cowboys, but happened to hit them at a time in their business when it wasn't perfect, whether it was real estate oil and gas, private equity, whatever that may be, they were having their struggles. So, Jerry was, in the oil and gas business, and he and Mike had done really well, and the opportunity was there. He seized it, and the rest is history. As you said today, Forbes came out with quite the number. Jerry and I and Charlotte always laugh. We don't ever feel it, but it's nice to see it.
It sounds like at the time, like his advisors from a business standpoint were saying this would be lunacy to do this, and he was going to you guys because he wanted you to justify him following his passion, which was to do this. He wanted you guys all to be together in business and have a life in football.
Well, you've seen the Landman deal where he obviously goes through that he wanted to work with his family, and I think that was part of it. I think he's always loved Charlotte and Jerry and myself and wanted to work with us day to day, and I think he saw that as a way to a path to get to work with us was something that we could all have a passion for and enjoy and play a big role in. And he's certainly been right there and given us prominent roles and being a part of this, and we've embraced it, and it's turned out really well.
He actually learned from working with his grandfather, or our grandfather, his dad, but with Pat Jones, Papa Pat, that when Dad was in college, they started an insurance company, and Dad was selling insurance with his dad. And they built up that insurance company, and that's where our dad got his first start, really having some money to be able to go do something with. But he kind of went his way, and our grandfather went his way, and forever he has said, I wish we would have stayed bound at the hip and gone forward, and we would have accomplished a lot more together than we did separately. And he's always felt that, and I think that's a big reason. It is a big reason why from day one, as we were getting out of college, he wanted us staying right there, building this with him and being a part of everything that we do around here.
You mentioned your grandfather, and your dad, Jerry, worked for him. How much did he learn from him in terms of becoming a marketing genius?
Oh, probably everything. I think our grandfather was about 5'6", and in cowboy boots with heels and a big top hat. He was larger than life and made everything larger than life. And how he dealt with all of his business was very much rubbed off on what Dad is today, and it says it in the documentary of how Dad grew up in a local grocery store that he brought in greeting customers and all of that. You can see it, and my grandmother swears that he was talking at 9 months. You know what? I think I believe it. I don't think he stopped talking since he was 9 months old. But she's always super proud of him. But I think that was there was a lot of showmanship in all of that. And my grandfather, but also, and my grandmother. I mean, we would go visit them, and she would have a player piano, and everybody's around the piano singing and dancing and all of that. There was just always show involved in everything. So I think he certainly comes by it genetically almost.
He was so impactful, our grandfather on Dad, that still today, that there's probably not a conversation that he doesn't go, my father. He goes, y'all's great. He tells a story about Papa Pat almost daily, but for sure often throughout the last 35 years, and even before we got involved with the Cowboys, but he always reflected back on what his dad was doing. And I'm sure that Charlotte and Stephen can speak to it too, but I find myself with a group of people, and I'll be having dinner with them, and I go, well, my dad, and all of a sudden, I'm telling stories about Dad just as Dad told stories about his dad.
Yeah.
And it's impactful.
Yes. Oh my. The other thing is, Papa Pat not only was the marketing his grocery store, but he was an insurance salesman, which we all know and say, oh, that's an insurance salesman. But that's what my grandfather was, and that's where you learn to ask for the order, and he is so in tune with that. And whether it was our stadium, AT&T Stadium, when we were all involved in putting that in there, whether it was the Star, he was all about asking for the order and the premiums that come with that. I mean, that was so important to him. The other thing that I would never leave out in terms of his business acumen is my mother's father was a banker and an amazing business guy in terms of the finance and that aspect of it. And I think it really made an impact on his life when, he was cutting and shooting and, wanting to take big risks. My grandfather on my mother's side, Daddy John, was a very calming influence of really saying, hey, now let's think about this in terms of how I would think about it if I were loaning money to that particular entity that you're looking at. And I think, and one of his best friends in life was my mother's brother, Johnny, who now runs our bank, and he had the same type of mind in terms of being a finance guy, a banking person, and somebody, that really knew how to look at things and give you that financial perspective that I think's come in super handy, not only for him, but obviously being involved in a bank certainly influences Charlotte, Jerry, and myself.
When you talked about the risks that he took financially, his experience early on in the NFL couldn't have been worse. The team was 1-15 on the field, being criticized around the globe. And at the same time, as you mentioned, he's losing $1 million a month that he has to turn that part of it around. And nobody in the NFL among the traditional owners really embraced him. He was an outcast when he wanted to change the business model, right? He thought, why should I share with the Cleveland Browns when I'm way more aggressive marketing my team than they are? Why shouldn't I be rewarded for my hustle? And you guys all played a role in that, but especially you, Charlotte, with the Nike deal and swooshing the stadium. And
all the
what was that
things.
period of time like?
Well, I think when you look back on it, it was like all the innovation and the thrive and the vision came out of necessity. It's like we had no choice. It was like you had to figure out how to, wake up and how are you going to pay for the light bill today? Much less the player that's sitting right over there. So everything with it, there was just this clock always of we have to figure out how to make this work. There was nothing to go back and draw upon and get to fund the next round. I mean, it was like we had to go find it. And I think that was, for us, I know my involvement came after Steven's involvement. Jerry was right behind me, but it was one of those, my first instruction from my dad was find a way to stop losing money, and whatever you do, don't tarnish the star. I think at that moment, he knew what he had had the opportunity to buy. And that was something that was so much more valuable than the piece of paper that it was written on, that it belonged to people, that it was a culture, that it was something that people were fanatic over, and that really meant something special to them. And how do you make sure that you protect that while you figure out a way to move forward and a way to move from the next day to the next day? And I think us getting in the middle of it, I'm not going to speak for Steven because he certainly knew so much more about football than I ever did. But, I didn't know anything about what I was doing. But Dad gave us each all the confidence in the world of like, it's okay, you're going to fail, you're going to mess up, but just figure out why it went wrong and figure out how to make it go right. And so you were supported in your failure, knowing that you were just trying to figure out a way to be successful. And I think that was the greatest gift that he could have given us, was that trust. It's like, I'm going to trust that you're really trying to help us figure this out, and whatever it takes. And we had a lot of bad things that didn't work, a lot of bad ideas, but we had enough good ones that really revolutionized sport.
I think one interesting thing in the documentary that really got my attention, and you felt it when we were living it, with the other owners in the first, in the early part of our tenure. But when, Carmen Policy was, obviously very upfront about most owners didn't want Jerry in the league, and they were actually trying to think of ways to not have Jerry in our family and force him out because of his aggressive nature, whether it was the Nike deal or other marketing ideas, and then of course the thoughts that everybody should be motivated and put on the incentive to go out and drive revenue. And other owners didn't like that. That was different than the historical way the league had been run. And so to see that, really come out in a documentary where people actually say it. Now, as you know, Carmen goes on to say how much people respect it and how at the end of the day, it's really what a positive and what a huge influence Jerry has been to the league and has really made everybody's team more valuable. And I think everybody, today embraces Jerry and has a lot of respect for what he brings. Sometimes, it may be an in-your-face type style, that people are not totally for. But, at the end of the day, they have much respect for what he's accomplished, the value he's brought to the NFL. And, I think it'll continue to influence where this league moves going forward.
His mindset wasn't not to share the revenue. His mindset was to grow the revenue. So he wasn't trying the perception of what he was trying to accomplish, once you got through all the minutia of what he was looking at doing, which was actually doing it the right way and creating value with your stadium or creating value in the local market. He wasn't trying not share the revenue that was coming in nationally. He was trying to look at it from a different perspective. And once the league understood that, and you heard it in the documentary, it did evolve over to where what he was really preaching from day one. And again, it was about growing the pie. And if we grow the pie, that is better for everyone involved. That's better for the players, it's better for the teams, and it's better for the fans because you put a better product on the field.
I thought one of the most powerful moments in the documentary was when Jerry's talking about going to the owners' meetings, when he's at odds with the league. The league has sued Jerry and the Cowboys over this approach he's taken with marketing. And Jerry countersues for 3 times that amount. And they ask him to leave the meeting while they discuss the lawsuit. And Jerry turns to them and says, I know you're trying to take my team from me. Let me assure you that if I win, I'm going to make you pay every dollar I've sued you for, no matter how long it takes. What was that like? That period of time must have been tumultuous.
Jerry actually got to a point where there was, Jerry's an emotional man at the end of the day. And just as you saw Jerry show his emotions, my father's the same way. I mean, he really, he's been through traumatic experiences, as he likes to call them, and it brings out the emotion. And I'll never forget those meetings during that time frame. We'd literally go back to the room and he would go into tears. And because deep down he felt like he was not only doing the best thing for the Cowboys, obviously, but he's also doing the best thing for the league, and thought he was, in his mind, being a true partner and a great partner and a good partner. And, he sincerely felt that way, and he felt like he was, being misread and misunderstood in terms of what he was trying to get accomplished. And there were people in the room who did understand what he was trying to get accomplished, but that was a very emotional time frame when we owned the team. And, I know, it really affected him, and it was traumatic for him.
Couple things I want to get to as we're running out of time here. One of the great anecdotes is after he ends his partnership with Jimmy, after winning back-to-back Super Bowls, he says he went home and got in bed with your mom, Jean, and she said to him, "You just can't leave good enough alone, can you?" What did you think of that moment in the documentary?
Well, it's very true. I think that it's so true, and I think it's interesting to go back and look at the journey, because I think for my parents, I know as we have sat in all of this, kind of the last year watching it, is that it really peels off a scab, opens a box that they had put away and really didn't want to go revisit it because of how painful it was. And so much negative. We'd gone through such a hard, difficult time. And then we had been so terrible, and then it had turned around and we had had the best of times. And then all of a sudden for it all to explode like that, it's like, can't we just get along? Can't we just all make this work? And I think for her, that's what she felt. She felt a lot of it. I think everybody did. I think Stephen's like, I know this will all get figured out. And it couldn't. It was too far down that road. But I think at the time, everybody felt like her. Like, are we gonna resolve this? And y'all both should. Can't you talk and both resolve? And, I think that was the pain point. for both of them.
Yeah, Charlotte says that very well in terms of, because I felt the same way. What are we doing here? I mean, this is going well, we're winning. But I think one thing the documentary does is it sheds light that it wasn't just Jerry having those feelings. Jerry felt Jimmy having those feelings, that it was time. And I will tell you that there are players that maybe don't come out and still say it in the documentary that were saying, maybe it's time. And Jimmy always said he was a 4 or 5 year guy. He said, I don't ever stay in one place. Now he stayed at Fox he probably finally decided, hey, I'm happy right here at Fox, I can do my deal, and hats off to him. He's amazing talent and a great man, and he was great to work with and be a part of something special with. But I think even Mother missed it. I know I missed it because I was thinking like, y'all, what are we doing? Why can't we fix this and keep this train going? But it just, I think Jerry had read the tea leaves right, that Jimmy was ready, and consequently he was ready. And you saw in some of the documentary how they both, turned the other cheek sometimes and did what you had to do. I mean, there was I forgot some of those interviews with Costa.
Oh my gosh.
Where Jimmy's pretty out front and Jerry's out front.
Well, that was like Dad forgot those too. He's watching the series and he's like, I completely forgot about that interview. Then he gets all anxious about it all over
accepting of that.
I can't believe I answered that question the way
And I
I
didn't
did.
see that interview. I thought I was the only one who knew about Jacksonville. Everybody knew about Jacksonville.
I was surprised.
It's like just so much of it was, for them reliving all of that and seeing all of those things. And I think part of it for Dad, I think, was actually validating of like, see, I didn't actually make that up. I did. It wasn't just me. Sometimes you wonder, it's like, okay, was it just me? Did I see that wrong? And then for him to go back and see a lot of that and all that footage, and then a lot of Jimmy's comment, all of that stuff, it was a bit validated in how it got to where it got to, but then also it was just very interesting for them to go back and sit in that moment for a bit.
It's been 30 plus years since you guys have been to a Super Bowl. I think we got a sense in the documentary toward the end how much you want it for Jerry one more time. How are you going to feel if it does or doesn't happen?
I think we all have the same one wish. I kind of remember us sitting there at the last Super Bowl and everyone that was so tight, and you're just praying, oh, please God, just let us walk away here. I promise you I'll never ask for anything again. And now it's like, can we please start asking again? Like, can we ask again now? And I think, what I hope the documentary shows, because I don't think today a lot of people see it, feel it, or really want to believe it, is how truly passionate and how much he just wants to win. And I hope they see that is truly authentic, because I think it gets covered and lost with all of the chaos that seems to surround everything that we do, that his true passion and belief in the game and love of the players and of the fans and this whole opportunity of, he'd give everything just to get to go back.
Well, I think that's the big thing, and I think that's where, if there's one thing the media / our fan base that you hear people frustrated, which I totally understand, with our lack of success in the big games and our playoff success has not been there. But where I think they really miss it is that he would, as Charlotte said, no telling what he might give, to have a Super Bowl. And I don't even think it's close. And he never would compromise, making the franchise more, economically stronger. And if he could give that up for one of these big Super Bowls, there's no question in my mind he'd do it. And I think that's where, no matter what you say, until you get it done, you gotta, there's always going to be a question mark. But, that's where I would say people have it wrong, that he doesn't have business and franchise value ahead of winning. That's just not right.
I mean, I think that's the beauty of this game. That's the beauty of the NFL. It's hard. If it's not apparent that this organization, with him leading the way, trying to do everything humanly possible to put a championship team on that field and go win a Super Bowl. It's what is thought about daily. It's what every move, every thought process, everything that we do as an organization and as a family, that is the goal, and that is the energy that's put that direction. But that's the beauty of our game. It's hard to get that done.
Well, from where he was, advised not to buy the Cowboys, to becoming the most successful business owner in the entire sports world, to winning 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, going into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and you all have played an integral part of all of that in what's really just a family business. Thanks for sharing
Thank you,
so
Ed.
many great stories. Enjoyed it.
Enjoyed it as well. Thank you.